Hey JD.
Good morning, afternoon, evening, depending on where you are. How you doing?
Good, good. So let's give it a couple more minutes to see, give people some time to join. I think we're on our side. Let's do a quick retweet or just let's tweet out from the official account that we're going live now. And then JD, if you guys can do that on your end as well, it typically helps to give it a one more boost.
I'll do that right now, man.
Awesome.
All right, tweet is sent out, and I've done the obligatory spill coffee all over myself to start the day. So we're looking good.
Off to a good start.
Literally, just as I was pressing unmute, I spilled coffee all down my white shirt. So that's really
Oh
awesome.
man.
But it's a good
By the
thing
way,
that I have a face for radio, and we're doing this on Twitter Spaces. It's perfect.
same here. So, where are you based?
I'm in Miami, beautiful Miami, Florida. Yep, it's about 80 degrees already here today. Um,
That's great. Yeah, I
yeah,
think I'm in New York and it's starting to warm up. But currently in San Francisco and it's pretty chilly here. It's like 40 to 50 right now.
yeah. It's New York has had a really weird year for weather, eh? It's
It
been
has, yeah.
it's felt super strange. Every time I'm there, it's like everybody is super confused. Like I was there in the summer for a while, and it was freezing. I was there later in the I guess winter season a bit, and it was like super smoking warm, and everybody was like, "What is going on?" Anyways, it's been an interesting year.
Yeah, but I'm looking forward to warmer weather. I mean, like,
Heck
New York
yeah,
feels a little depressing in the winter.
heck yeah. Yeah, it's I could never live there. I don't know how you guys do it. I talk about this a lot, like ideology and politics and all that crap aside. Um, it's the climate is just so crazy, and with all the downtown and being so congested, it's so dark, and I don't know. I couldn't do it. I feel like I'm excited to go home every time I'm in New
No,
York
no,
City.
no, I agree with you. Like, especially if you're like in the center of Manhattan, right? You have all these
Oh
tall
man,
buildings. So you have like a 1 or 2 hour window where you get direct sunlight.
yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. Like on my patio at my place, I have an unobstructed view of the ocean, and um, I have sun all day. Like when the sun comes up, it's on my patio, and the sun goes down, it's still on my patio. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
But now I'm just bragging. So let's we can we can wait for a few more people to jump in here, and then it's up to you, man. You're the boss.
Cool. Yeah, I think we can get it started because what we see is a lot of people tune in afterwards for the recording.
Yeah,
So just not to hold anyone up, let's jump into it. So, JD, thanks for being with us here today. If you want to give a quick introduction on, who you are and what your project is, we can take it from there.
yeah, sounds good. First, I just wanted to, and we didn't talk about this in advance, but I don't know if anybody's heard about what happened to Bob Lee yesterday in San Francisco. Um,
Oh
just
yeah.
yeah, just sending out condolences to his family and friends. I've had the luxury of meeting him a few times. He's definitely not a friend, but and seeing him present many times. It's incredibly sad for the space, for tech, for San Francisco. And the reason I'm bringing this up is nobody has any clue why that happened. But it is a bit of a reminder sometimes, even if it didn't happen for this reason. We're in a space that makes us somewhat attractive for weird types of events like this. So
Right.
just be careful, everybody, especially at conferences, especially when you're traveling for work. Be
Yeah, I
careful.
was gonna say, especially when you're traveling overseas, right? I have heard of this. I mean, you know, I had heard of people being targeted at conferences and you know, and things of that sort.
Anyways, I didn't want to be a buzzkill. Just wanted to bring that up because we have a venue, we have a voice. It's a terrible shame that happened, but um, you know, I guess it's on all of us to be prudent. So that's that. Okay, we can move on. JD Gagnon, that's me, one of the co-founders of Benki. Probably the least smart of all the co-founders at Benki, but I'm the only one that is comfortable getting on these things. So that's why I get to do all the talking. I've been in the space since 2016, well, 15, 16, I guess, actively building and supporting projects since 2017, 16, 17. We're deep in Avalanche before Avalanche was common knowledge. And we were part of the seed round and just really believed in what Goon and Kevin were working on from the early days, even of the white paper. And so we were excited to add some of our products to support Avalanche through Roam Blockchain Labs. We received some grants for Roam Terminal and for Velux and RoamNet, which is an algorithmic trading platform. RoamNet is a data infrastructure entity. Anyways, long story short, Avalanche Foundation, Ava Labs, asked us very early after they launched, hey, would you guys launch a borrow-lend protocol? And we thought, hey, that sounds like a pretty good idea. And so here we are. We started Benki, started working on it 2.5 years ago, which feels like an eternity, but also feels like yesterday. We went live in August 21. And so we're about 1.5 years, a little more than 1.5 years live now. And it's been pretty exciting. Obviously, we had an incredible run up. We had 3 billion in TVL within the first month, which was mind blowing. At the time, I never thought in a million years that would happen to a protocol that we were a part of. And then, of course, I don't need to remind everybody how fun 2022 was. But the space has had a lot of friction and challenges, and we've just been building and trying to get ready for the next cycle and make sure that we have new products, innovative products. We're adding value to the Avalanche ecosystem and the users, and making as many great partnerships as possible. And Sin Futures, of course, is one of them.
It's great. Yeah, I didn't realize that you guys had been around for so long. August 2021. We actually went live around a similar time. We went live with our V1 in October 2021.
Yeah, and we were talking to you guys right after that. I actually believe we invested in Sin Futures also, but nonetheless, we were talking to you guys very early on, and it's been really fun to see the adoption on different chains, the amount of transactions, and the volume that you guys are getting now. And we're excited to see how that grows going forward, of course.
Yeah, same here. It was super exciting to see like the growth of Avalanche in late 2021 into 2022, and yeah, I want to would love to get your thoughts on how 2022, the events in 2022 has affected you guys. But maybe just taking a step back for a second, was just curious personally, like, how did you guys come up with the name?
This is like the most common question. I do these things quite often, and I'm pretty sure it's the one question other than who are you, JD, and how did you get into crypto that I'm asked every time. It's a good question. So a few of our core founding team members, 3 in particular, are of Asian and specifically Chinese heritage. None of them live in China, of course, but they are of Asian heritage. And so Benki is actually a nod to the Mandarin phrase "bun chi." I can't say it very well because I am not of Asian heritage, But what bunchi means, roughly translated, is interest over time. And so we thought it kind of sounds like, banky. It kind of sounds borrow-lendish, but it was a nod to, other cultures and the global nature of crypto and blockchain technology. And we just wanted to, do something a little different. We wanted to essentially make up a word, more or less, at least in the English language, so that we could have a really clean URL, and we could do a lot of fun stuff with branding. So that's how it came out. It is kind of confusing though, because it comes from bunchi, but we call it banky, and then we call the token the chi token, which is confusing. But it was intentional. Don't ask me why, but the token is called chi, not key, or qui, or all the other variations that we hear. But it's been fun. It's been fun having a unique name like that, because this question does come up, and it's always a good time to explain it.
Yeah, and I think to your point, it's short, easy to remember, and it stands out, right? It's unique.
Yes, yes, sir.
It works really well. Cool. So, there are a lot of staking protocols in the market. So I'm not sure exactly how many on Avalanche. Would love to hear a little more about how you guys differentiate yourselves.
Maybe if you can just clarify, do you mean liquid staking protocols, or do you?
Yeah, liquid staking.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah. So there's a few other liquid staking protocols. They're all great teams. We know them well. We are supporters of multiple programs for liquid staking on every ecosystem. Liquid staking invariably is one of the largest potential risk vectors for an ecosystem, mainly because you're taking something that was designed and architected to be as decentralized as possible. And if you don't do liquid staking appropriately, you can end up centralizing a decentralized product with the single point of failure for a lot of your assets and a lot of your ecosystem security. So it's not a simple task. Liquid staking, especially on Avalanche, because of the C chain, X chain, P chain path that you have to follow, to do that in an automated, decentralized, and incredibly secure way is very, very, very difficult. And so, yeah, we spent a lot of time architecting that. We worked with Avalabs early on to make sure that, they were comfortable with our architecture and our security practices. We're very proud of the security and consistency in our in the platform and in the application. It's been live, I believe, over a year and a couple of months now, and it's been working flawlessly the entire time. So we're excited about that. We have maintained a greater amount of decentralization. We don't run currently any of the nodes, which is somewhat unique from other liquid staking protocols in different ecosystems. We said, hey, we don't want to be running all these nodes and be that single point of failure any more than we have to. Of course, there's still a single point of failure for our smart contracts and some of the back-end logic, but I'll come back to that in a minute. And so, yeah, we wanted to lead with security first. That was just super important. Decentralization first. And then the product design and the economics and all of that stuff could come after, but only if those two things, in our opinion, were optimized. Were we willing to do this? So, I mean, of course, we were able to come to market earlier than most, so we got a bit of a head start. I think it also helps that we had built fairly good relationships with the existing validators in the ecosystem. A lot of them we know personally, and we had built relationships with allocators, capital allocators, and larger investors. So that also helped us. And that's a bit of an art. You can see all the different platforms and protocols. Everybody kind of caters to a different audience to a certain extent, and of course we're no different. But it's worked out really well. And I mean, again, our security is incredible. We're using a fairly sophisticated stack of security products and key sharding and all of these different things, such that the only way to the only way to ever have an impact on liquid staking or get access to any of it is physically in a series of data centers at the same time. And we own the servers in the data centers, and they're distributed globally. So it's, that's something that we're very proud of, something that has been received very well by partners. As an example, our partnership with Liquid Collective and Alluvial, which is institutional liquid staking, which will roll out probably in 2023 with them. That was a big factor. Is what is your security? How is your security different? And we're pretty stoked about that.
Yeah, it's awesome to hear that you guys have made so much progress on the decentralization front. I mean, I think the reality is a lot of Web3 projects have decentralization as like an end goal, but we're still a lot of us are still making progress to it. I think for you guys, completely decentralizing the node operators goes a long way in fulfilling that vision.
Yeah,
Just curious, like,
sorry, just one
yeah, go
final
ahead.
thought on that. I mean, it's a good point that we maybe in some cases don't see often enough a meaningful effort to decentralize as much as you can. The flip side of that, and it's worth noting, is that we're building nascent technology in the space still. And decentralizing at all costs is not necessarily a good solution either. So our approach has been very step by step. Let's first make sure we understand the architecture, the security. Let's make sure we protect assets to the best of our possible ability. Let's make sure we protect our users to the best of our ability. And as we are very confident in that, we step by step decentralize more and more over time. The exception, obviously, being that design decision to use other nodes. Now, that doesn't preclude us from using our own nodes for certain circumstances, which we will, of course, talk about, I'm sure, today. But the vast majority of the delegated stake is done so in a relatively unbiased way. So, yeah, good point, though.
Got it, got it. Maybe for those of us who aren't familiar, can you tell me a little about the difference between traditional staking and liquid staking? I think this is a really exciting topic because if this year has any major narratives on the project side, it's likely the ZK rollups, right? That's one big narrative. But the second big narrative is liquid staking, and a lot of it is being driven by the Shanghai upgrade that's coming up. There's been a lot of conversation, especially with the centralized blowups over the last year, that people are going to start moving into liquid staking solutions.
Yeah.
So could you tell us a little about like the details of liquid staking, what some of the benefits are, and how you guys approach it?
Yeah, just a small comedic interlude here. They're calling it the Chapella upgrade now, which all I can think about when I hear that is the best spokesperson for that upgrade is Dave Chappelle. I think it'd be hilarious to have Dave Chappelle.
I was just thinking.
And I can't help it. Every time I read it, all I think is Dave Chappelle is now a spokesperson for Ethereum, which would be hilarious. So yeah, there's some major differences, obviously. Staking is critical for proof of stake ecosystems, of course. The requirement to stake, as opposed to having hardware to mine, is how the ecosystem becomes secure. And so obviously there's many different designs for proof of stake, but all of them are relatively similar, at least from a high level. And in the sense that you stake some assets on a validator. If you have enough, you start your own validator. And on Avalanche, it's currently 2,000 AVAX minimum. And you start a validator, which has some costs, and takes a little bit of technical know-how, not much, but on Avalanche in particular. Other ecosystems, it's a lot more difficult. But on Avalanche, it's pretty straightforward. The challenge is when you stake those assets, they're stuck. Those assets are stuck there for the duration of the lockup period that you elected. Now on Avalanche, the minimum lockup period is 2 weeks, which is, again, quite attractive. It's very good for the design of liquid staking products. But when you stake initially, you pick your time horizon. So it could be 2 weeks, you could select 2 months, et cetera, et cetera. The challenge with that is it's fairly inefficient from a capital perspective. So if you're looking at proper portfolio composition, if you're looking at how to risk, how to de-risk, how to hedge, and how to manage your portfolio in a little bit more sophisticated way, obviously you don't want to have assets completely tied up and locked that you can't adjust to changes or anything that's happening in the marketplace. So that's kind of the initial, from the user's perspective, difference between the two is liquid staking gives you the opportunity to, instead of staking and running a validator, you're actually delegating your assets via Benki to other validators, and in exchange you get the S of X token, which represents your interest. Interest not being like a revenue piece, but your interest as in you own those assets and you can get them back. So but what liquid staking assets allow you to do is then there's a lot of second and third order DeFi options. You can deposit them in Benki, borrow against them, deposit them in Aave. Good friends of ours at Aave, shout out to them. And you can deposit there. They've been huge supporters of SFX in their pools also, which is very exciting. And there's many other second order. Kion is another optimizer, yield optimizer that has some incredible strategies. There's quite a few. I don't want to miss anybody by trying to name the ones off the top of my head, but that allows users the opportunity, to free up that equity in their assets and be able to use it, leverage it, do other things, hedge, like I said. And that's very important for a lot of people, but also it allows them, if you need your AVAX back, if you need, for whatever reason, at any point in time, you can simply go and swap that liquid staking asset back to AVAX on an exchange. And that's very important and creates a lot of optionality for people.
That's great. So I think to sum it up, could you just let users know exactly, like from a very high level, right? Like what they gain from liquid staking?
Yeah, good question. I talk about this so much, so I apologize if I'm going a little too deep. But yeah, from a very high level, the difference is normal staking at the ecosystem level. You have to either operate a validator or you can delegate yourself. But then you have to manage all of those things, and your assets are locked for a predetermined period of time. Liquid staking, you get a slightly lower yield, of course, because there's fees and other things that happen in there. You get a slightly lower yield, not much, but then you have an asset that represents your interest in the staked product, but you can go and use that asset elsewhere. And so it just frees up. If you had, as an example, 100 AVAX and you liquid staked it, you would get a representative S AVAX in exchange. And that S AVAX, you can go and deposit it into a lending protocol or do whatever you want with it, really. And continue to use the equity in your assets, whereas normal staking is locked up.
Got it. So you mentioned that during this market, following 2022, you guys are focused on building. So can you tell me a little more about some of the products that you guys have coming up?
Yeah, we've got a lot of exciting stuff coming up. We released not that long ago some VE structures. We have some exciting upgrades coming to that in the next probably quarter. But before that, we announced recently Project Ignite. And that's pretty exciting. Ignite is, so stepping back, I'll explain what Ignite is, but we're working on Ignite, which is a really exciting subnet support infrastructure type product. And we're super stoked about that. And then we've got a few other things we're working on, but we're not quite announcing those publicly yet. So definitely working to increase the effectiveness and access to subnet proliferation, to liquid staking. We're very, very focused on second and third order use cases for the liquid staked assets. And then, of course, we're excited to roll out institutional liquid staking later in the year. Now, Project Ignite, is that what you're wanting to go to next?
Yep, that's the one.
Yeah, so we're super excited about this. So one of the things that brought us to Avalanche in the first place, of course, was the architecture of subnets. And I mean, in hindsight, when we read the white paper, I think what I thought subnets would mean was only the tip of the iceberg in terms of what they actually are capable of doing now that we've seen it kind of come to fruition. But one of the challenges is we want to open up. One of the advantages of subnets is that there's theoretically no limit on how many subnets you can have. And theoretically and in practice, the more subnets, generally speaking, the more people that validate as a general rule, and it leads to greater, not reduced, performance of the ecosystem. So Avalanche as a whole, the more subnets, the more validators, the more performant. It's not the opposite, which is what happens in many other ecosystems, that once they get to that theoretical max, then they've got to figure out L2s and other ZKs and all this other stuff. And so that's very, very exciting. But in order to facilitate that and really to see the power of subnets come to fruition, we need to reduce the barrier to entry as much as possible. So currently, if you want to have a non-elastic subnet, meaning it's permission validation, which many are doing at first, I guess the recommendation is to have somewhere between 7 or more nodes, 7 and 10 for sure, which would require 7 times 2,000 AVAX. You would need 14,000 AVAX, which at today's prices is not cheap. So for a lot of like indie gaming studios or new innovative DeFi applications or businesses that enterprises that want to build a private network on chain, for some of them, just that staking cost alone to get the nodes set up, and then having to operate 7 to 10 nodes is also not super cheap every month, is a meaningful barrier to entry. Same thing for individual users that would like to participate in validation, but just maybe don't have the resources to do it at that level. So Ignite, the point of Ignite is, now that we have critical mass and very high degree of confidence in our liquid staking product, we are making it so that we're reducing that barrier to entry by about 90%, eventually greater than 90%. We're trying to optimize towards 100% reduction in cost. But currently, when Ignite goes live, which is happening very soon, hint, hint, exciting, we're just working through a couple of minor items on the audits, and we're good to go. So that's exciting. But it will be reduced down to 200 AVAX to set up a validator. So what'll happen is you'll have to stake some Chi. And we haven't released all the details on that yet. So excuse me for being somewhat vague on purpose. But you'll have to stake some Chi. And there's a process to do that, of course. And if you stake some Chi, which is what could be slashed, it's essentially collateral, or it could be exposed to some sort of penalization if you don't act appropriately. And then on your behalf, a node will be established. So you can have all the benefits of operating nodes and the yield associated with those nodes, and the yield associated with validating subnets with those nodes if you're a subnet operator. But you only have to put in 10% of the assets in order to do so, which is incredibly exciting. We're super stoked about it. At the Avalanche Summit, for anybody that's going there, that's listening on the AMA right now, we will have a fairly detailed presentation on a lot more details regarding Ignite. So that's when we're releasing all the information, and I think you'll be pretty pleased with the timeline to launch at that point.
That's great. I love that you guys are democratizing access to a product like this, right? I think that's the core theme behind DeFi, right? We want to make more accessible the types of products that maybe in TradFi wasn't as accessible to the average person. And it sounds like with Project Ignite, you guys are really doing a big push to make this an accessible product, not only for like the institutional empowered DeFi users, but just for your average kind of DeFi, average crypto holder.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, again, coming back to the example I used before, I mean, if you've got, Blizzard Entertainment or Microsoft or JP Morgan or Goldman, I mean, they're not worried about the 250,000 plus, upfront cost to operating validators. That's just probably a rounding error in the amount they're spending to bring things on chain. But a lot of innovation, especially in a nascent space and an early, emerging market, such as blockchain, I mean, there's a lot of the greatest ideas come from small, kind of independent developers, people that may have been in academia or may have been in entrepreneurship elsewhere or Web 2 and say, hey, like whatever I was doing before, I have a unique knowledge set. And now with blockchain enablement, we can really, have one and one is three. But the challenge for a lot of those smaller groups, startups and one, two one, two person operations, they just often don't have the resources. And I mean, crypto has been blessed with the opportunity, I suppose, in many ways that fundraising over the previous few cycles has been very much, hey, we have an idea. Do you want to invest? And, for whatever reason, venture capital has been willing to invest. But as time goes on, I think, being able to secure that capital so early on in large quantities prior to product is going to be more and more difficult. And so for that reason, we can't assume that the money printer will continuously stay on. VCs will have endless amounts of LP capital, and all these projects will be supremely funded early on. And so this is a huge step in reducing that reducing that barrier to entry, and we think will lead to a lot more innovation than was previously possible.
Great. And so one of the major themes for you guys is security, which is paramount to a product like this. Can you tell me more about your guys' efforts to ensure the highest level of asset and user security?
Yeah. So very, very early on, we said, and that was really kind of our foundational vision, excuse me, when we decided to launch a Borrow Lend is, hey, DeFi is unfortunately plagued with a lot of rushed go-to-markets, a lot of, how do I say this politically? A lot of under-tested, under-audited platforms that have led to some unfortunate circumstances. That's becoming less and less now. We have much better auditors in the space than ever before, much more, I think, prudent and capable developers than ever before. There's a lot of incredibly committed, incredibly experienced people now building in the space, which is exciting. But for us, we said, hey, what are the two most critical things that could plague a lending protocol? Number one is smart contract security. That was a big piece. And number two is economic risk. And economic risk being, what are the things that can happen outside of our control that have a meaningful and in some cases severe impact on what happens inside of Benki? So how can we anticipate, prepare, protect against what we like to call, I call dirty swans, but most would call a black swan. We can get into that later, why I call it a dirty swan. But anyways, the focus really has been on, how do we mitigate those risks? How do we make sure that we're investing in security in a meaningful way, having multiple audits of things, having ongoing security contracts, so that absolutely everything that we're doing has three sets of eyes that are looking at everything before it gets deployed. Our testing protocols and procedures are, in my opinion, second to none. We know a lot of blockchain companies, and most people are pretty impressed with how we test and how we manage much of our OPSEC and DevOps, which is also important. But economic risk, which is the question that you asked before I go down a rabbit hole, we partnered early on with Gauntlet, which at the time was the premier and primary economic risk vendor, I suppose, in the space. Great group. They've been around forever. Incredibly smart guys, Tarun and team. And so that was huge for us. It was an incredibly expensive investment to begin with, but we were very comfortable and confident with the results we got, and we felt great about how secure and safe our platform was. Over time, a good friend of ours, Omer, started a company called Chaos Labs, which has now become a pretty household name. But at the time, just a good friend of ours that, super bright group, really driven, principled entrepreneurs. And we said, hey, this is exciting because they are doing agent-based modeling, which is slightly different. And we can simulate a lot of different situations, a lot of different dirty or black swans. And so for us, we spend a heck of a lot of time. We have a couple of people that their full-time responsibility at Benki is just managing risk, just managing economic risk. So working with Chaos Labs literally daily, using all of the dashboards that we have from Chaos Labs and others, and then the ones that we've created internally to see the health real time of absolutely every facet of the protocol, which is very, very, very important, especially early on. And this kind of comes back to where, to a certain extent, we have to balance and be very strategic about how, when, and where we decentralize, because some of these things, which aren't a big deal until something happens, and then it's a big deal, right? So it's kind of like when you think about life insurance. I mean, life insurance doesn't matter unless you die early, generally. And most people aren't going to die early, obviously, when you're still young and have a family. So most people, it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. But when it happens, of course, you go, crap, that person didn't have life insurance and now their family is totally screwed. We kind of see the risk modeling and economic risk management that way, that hopefully nothing ever happens and no one ever knows the amount of work we put into it. But we are putting in the work, because if it ever did happen, it would be catastrophic for both Avalanche and for the Benki users, and ultimately the community at large. And that's we don't take that lightly.
Yeah, and I completely agree here. What we usually talk about is how in Web3 in general, I think the average user doesn't see security as maybe a competitive advantage for a project, right? Because it's out of sight, out of mind. Until something happens, no one's really thinking about it.
Exactly. So everybody's always asking, when next Ponzi? When next Ponzi? I mean, I think that's kind of hilarious and a testament to the state of blockchain still. That's actually what we're thinking about as degens. But in 5 years from now, in my opinion, the only platforms that will survive are the ones that have very structured and objective risk management procedures and protocols. And I don't mean just economic risk. I mean, operational security. How are you managing your teams? How are you managing smart contracts, et cetera, et cetera? And what are we doing real time to make sure that the protocol remains as secure as is feasibly possible? Right now, the minimum acceptable standard for that in an unregulated global market like this is quite low. Obviously, there's a lot of crap that's happened where people have not been held accountable for what could be argued to be negligence. And now that the world is waking up to blockchain and its potential, and obviously we've seen regulators trying to stake their claim, so to speak, globally, whether it's securities regulators or commodities regulators, et cetera. Many jurisdictions are trying to really put their thumb on the market, at least in their domicile. And so we're of the opinion that this will be the standard very soon, but we wanted to make sure that we were doing that from day one and building trust, and it's worked. I mean, we've had a lot of conversations with institutional partners, enterprise partners, power users, and that's obviously something that's incredibly important to them. We've been very grilled by many different parties on our security practices and all of these things, and in the end, it's allowed them to make meaningful commitments and deposits into the protocols, which has obviously been very useful for us and for the users.
Yeah, I think most users would be surprised to see how projects like Benki, even us that's in features, how much time we spend on the back end really working on security. And to your point, it's not just about smart contract security, right? There's operational risk, there's treasury management, and so there's a slew of other areas where we really think about security. And to an earlier point, you mentioned some of the auditors in the space have gotten a lot more sophisticated. And I think that's one of the factors that's contributing to a more secure ecosystem of DeFi products in the market. But also that, projects like you guys are now looking at multiple auditors, just getting, multiple sets of eyes. going to communities in the form of like bounty programs and things like that to ensure that users get this, the safest and most secure experience possible from DeFi. I mean, even for us, as we get ready to launch Sin Futures V2 in the next few weeks, and then we're already, well underway on our V3. One of the things that we think about is how do we get more sets of eyes on our security, and it starts with engaging multiple auditors to take a look at it from different perspectives, but also getting some of the community involved with these bounty programs. And so, yeah, not a traditional competitive advantage, but I think more and more, especially, as DeFi brings in more users, security is just going to continue to be paramount to the overall growth and success of Web3.
Yeah, I just wanted to make one point of clarification before anybody jumps to conclusions. So when I say we have 2 or 3 sets of eyes on all of these things, beyond the immediate developers of the protocol. So the protocol and all of the technology is built and managed by Rome Blockchain Labs for Benki, which is 3 of us that are partners on Benki, that are co-founders on Benki, have another company called Rome Blockchain Labs, which we won't get into. But anyways, so we've done all of the tech development, deployment, and maintenance for Benki and liquid staking, et cetera. And so we have developers internally that are specific to Benki at Rome Blockchain Labs, an entire team. And then we have another team of what we call internal auditors inside of Rome Blockchain Labs that audits at arm's length. They weren't involved in building, they were just auditing. We also have another third party that we have on retainer, but he's a private auditor, one of the smartest guys I know. Honestly, he's kind of incredible. But anyways, he does very detailed, very time-consuming audits. And then we always have at least one public audit company where we can publish the reports. In many cases, we have more than one, but usually it's the reports are the same. So anyways, I just wanted to point that out. Another thing, if you're just speaking about the amount of commitment that it takes to manage this stuff properly, a lot of people don't know that Benki has 7 co-founders. We have a fairly large leadership team, and we have a fairly large development and management team, considering that it's a single protocol. And newer projects, I think, I see a lot of these kind of single founder, maybe 2 founder type projects. It's very difficult to manage protocols like this without, proper vertical integration, I think, expertise, staying in your lanes, having people that focus on specific things at a high level. So I would encourage a lot of new founders. I know it's challenging to think, hey, you're starting a project. I don't want to give up a bunch of equity, so to speak, to other founders. But it's a very time-consuming experience, and it requires a lot of focus and effort to do it properly. So, in my opinion, I would suggest don't sell yourself short. Make sure you have a solid team of people to begin with, so that you can, in fact, invest both time and resources in these types of things that are easy to overlook until they become a problem.
Yeah, that's actually a great point that I don't hear too often, that, try to build up that founder team. I know, like, even outside of Web3, even in Web2, being a solo founder is incredibly challenging. And, a lot of venture capitalists have come out, kind of pushing for this multi-founder setup. And so you bring a great point. This especially important when you're building a Web3 protocol. Yeah.
Well, and the thing is, like, a lot of the stuff that we're doing is, generally speaking, the whole space is ignorant to, like, even economic risk. I mean, we're not just taking well-established procedures and applying them to our protocol, although Chaos Labs and Gauntlet are doing very good things to create standardization of economic risk management. But all of this stuff is new, right? So not only do we have to protect against all of these different risks and protect our users, of course, and the business and our shareholders and investors, but we really need to focus on all of those kind of finer points of protection. And I don't want to beat a dead horse on this one, but it's very important, I think, to focus on that.
Yeah, and there are some like traditional kind of risk management tools and processes that projects should be following. I mean, sometimes I think projects are so focused on the world of Web3 and just and new that they forget like, let's say to give you an example, treasury management,
Yeah.
right? A lot of projects had exposure to the Terra blow up, to the FTX blow up, and even like the banking crisis that we've been having. It really reminds us that we need to spread risk, even treasury risk, across different products. Make sure you're largely in low risk instruments that are, for the most part, liquid, right? And it's not something projects really think about. Even when you think about banking, like how do we have multiple bank accounts to spread assets just in case there's like a broader macro failure, right?
Yeah, so this is one of the big disconnects, I think, between um, just Web3 and the rest of the world, right? So we talk a lot about why Web3, why self custody, why not your keys, not your coins, why are we trying to create autonomy and access globally? But with that comes responsibility. So a lot of people want all of those things, at least in theory, but what comes with it is the obligation, the requirement, the responsibility to manage a lot of these risks that wouldn't have existed in many cases in traditional finance or even in Web 2. Because when things are centralized, by nature, they have certain consumer protections. So if something goes sideways or something happens, there's a responsible, accountable party. In Web3, when it's all smart contracts, or the majority of it is smart contracts, you have a lot more personal responsibility to take an interest in, managing your own risk, managing, understanding, perceiving the risk of the protocols that you're participating in. And so for us, that was a big reason that we've invested heavily in Chaos Labs, and had an amazing dashboard built by them so that users can have real-time insight into the health and the operations of the protocol. We also partnered with Into the Block. Jesus is a good friend of mine, and they built us a really exciting user-facing granular risk dashboard that's also worth checking out. And I think, honestly, that is going to be the future of Web3. You're going to have as many opportunities for users to inspect and understand the relative security and economic risk associated with their assets. And so very, very important, I think, that people pay attention to that.
Yeah, I guess expanding on that a little bit, and as we get into the question of what you expect this year in 2023, not only for Benki but for the broader industry. We've had over the last year, we've had no shortage of blowups, right? We've had centralized lending platforms collapse, centralized exchanges, and just general macroeconomic headwinds. Yeah. So, how does like the events of the last year impact growth for Benki and the broader crypto industry? And then, what do you think the rest of the year is going to look like?
Yeah, this is a this is a pretty big question. I wish I had a crystal ball. I don't. So I'm just going to preface everything that I'm saying that this is my opinion personally, not the opinion of Benki or any of my partners at Benki. It may be, but for purposes of this conversation, let's assume it's not. It's just my opinion. It's also not financial advice. I am not an economist. I am not an expert. I am not an investment advisor. So all of that nonsense, we got out of the way. What do I think is going to happen in 23? Well, first of all, let's look at what happened in 22. And I think, we had our fair share of exploits in 2022. I think the total amount of exploited capital, as reported by, I think it was a Defiant, don't quote me on that, was about 3.5 billion. And right now, the total TVL in DeFi is plus or minus 50 billion. That's a ridiculously high percentage relative to many other industries, just from exploits alone and economic manipulation. And so I think it's something that that is now factoring in to existing protocols and new protocol launches that, hey, this is not something that we can overlook. Not that people were overlooking it before, but I think the events of the last year, even the on-chain events, um, have really crystallized in a lot of people's minds the obligation and responsibility of developers and builders. Now, building on that, we had a lot of momentum going into 21, right? So everybody was excited. DeFi summer had happened. We were seeing all of these new implementations of smart contracts that for many were paradigm shifting, ourselves included in many ways. Seeing Aave, Compound, Balancer, a lot of these Curve, a lot of these protocols early on, BZX, which has had its share of problems. But there was a lot of these protocols that when we first saw them, we went, holy crap. Like I thought that blockchain technology was going to revolutionize finance, but I had no idea that we could do this much this fast. And so that was really exciting. And for that reason, I think we got a lot of people, not necessarily new people, and I can talk about this later, but not necessarily new people in the space, but a lot of people that were, kind of on the adoption curve, your innovators and early adopters, now investing more and more assets into the space. And so we saw explosive growth, of course, which was very, very exciting. The problem with that is that we had this explosive growth, and then we had a lack of regulation and a lack of oversight and a lack of understanding of a lot of these risks. And unfortunately, we had some, I'll say nefarious, maybe not the best term, but we've had some interesting events over the last year where, founders of some of these centralized platforms and quasi-centralized platforms made some incredibly poor decisions. In many cases, it amounts to fraud and other things. And it really just put a stain on the space. We had a lot of momentum, a lot of excitement. The NFT and culture and gaming space was exploding. And all of a sudden, these collapses, Terra Luna, boom, Three Arrows, boom. Then we had BlockFi, we had all of these kind of centralized actors that all started having trouble, obviously, because they were also darn interdependent, but nobody understood the risk exposures because they were centralized and didn't have reporting responsibilities. So it's kind of a little bit of like, holy crap, things are amazing. All of our minds were blown. We're seeing a lot of development happening all at the same time, but happening in a relatively haphazard way. So when bull markets happen, you can raise money really easily at incredibly high valuations, very fast. And I think it gives people a sense of confidence that is misplaced. If you're launching into a bear or a bull market, it's all about speed. It's all about hype. It's all about FOMO, right? And you're trying to launch as fast as you can and get things out and evolve quickly and take out your competition and meme yourself into success. And I think that has proven to be a challenge for us, especially in this last cycle, because we had such an explosion of developer activity. That's probably the one area that we had a lot of people that weren't in crypto before coming into crypto in the last cycle, in my opinion, again, just my opinion, was developers. But unfortunately, a lot of those developers were drinking the Kool-Aid and just trying to do things very haphazardly. A lot of these people have no business being entrepreneurs or protocol operators, but here they are. The opportunity was there. The barrier to entry was really low. Most things are open source, at least a great deal of them. And so you can fork your way into existence and never do anything unique, and essentially try to create money out of nowhere. Well, I think what we're seeing now is those times have come mainly to an abrupt end, at least during the bear cycle, which is where we're at now. So what we're seeing now, and what I'm most excited about in 2023, is behind the scenes, if you're paying attention, there is an incredible amount of absolutely second to none development teams that are building incredible technologies, very sophisticated financial products that we're aware of, incredible private networks that are coming out, gaming networks, financial networks, permissioned and permissionless networks that are being developed and ideated on right now. I think we're going to see a really significant 0 to 1 innovation cycle when a lot of these projects that have been building through the bear are going to finally launch and deploy, and we'll see a totally different type of team and a totally different type of minimum acceptable standards for the space. Now, do I think in 2023 that we are going to go into a bull cycle? I have no freaking idea, to be honest. Our approach has always been, we can't control the market. We can't predict the market. So let's just build. We can't do anything about token price. We can't, not that we would want to. We can't do anything about market conditions, generally speaking. So let's make sure that we're prepared for the good and the bad and the ugly. And let's hope that the regulators in the US don't completely quash the progress that we've made, especially people like me that live in America. And I think yourself, I think you're in America. You're Pacific time though, aren't you?
Yeah, just for now, but I'm based in New York. Yeah.
You're in New York, yeah. Thanks for getting up at 7 in the morning to do this.
No worries.
But anyways, I think it would be exciting to see the space kick off, but we've got a lot of uncertainty, a lot of headwinds. So we're just focused, and I'd encourage everybody that's listening, just focus on understanding where the space has been, what have been the challenges that we've all seen, and you focus on your personal education, understand protocols, understand not code. I can't read code and I can't code, but understand at least logically how these things work and what are the risks. Don't have any FOMO. This is my advice. Don't have any FOMO. Although bull cycles feel like they happen in the blink of an eye, you have plenty of time to get in. And thinking that you're going to time anything to get in at the very bottom or get out at the very top, you're lying to yourself. No one has that foresight. Otherwise, they would be the only winners and we would all lose. So, spend the time if you're just a participant in the ecosystem, in the space. Spend the time, get to know founders, get to know projects. Most of us are pretty accessible, honestly. I have power users of Benki, people that have been with us for a long time that reach out weekly. I don't encourage everybody to message me weekly because it'll be impossible. But if you have questions, ideas, concerns, anything, feel free to reach out to us. And any other founder, it's the same way. The vast majority of founders in the space are incredibly accessible, which I think is also kind of unique to Web3, is that, we're very community forward. It's a bit of a double-edged sword, but we're very community forward. And, during 2023, it's a great year to spend time getting to know as many protocols and people in the space as you possibly can. And that'll help when things do start to change, when the tide starts to turn, you'll be ready.
Yeah, that's another good point about, one of the core differences between Web 2 and Web 3 is I think Web 3 is much more community focused, right? So it's never been as easy as it's become today to speak with DeFi teams, speak with different Web 3 projects, even if it's not directly through the founders, right? You can always go through core team members, get there through moderators, community ambassadors, and so forth. So many paths to really building a deeper connection with the projects that you use every day. We're coming up on time now, so I wanted to close this out by having you give us a little preview of what's to come in 2023 and beyond for Benki. I know you guys are beginning to roll out Ignite. You mentioned, there will be some institutional staking products in the future. Can you give us a little more, a general idea of what you guys are focusing on for the rest of the year?
Yeah, great questions. Of course, we did talk a little bit about this. Ignite is coming imminently. We've been working on governance structures. We worked with Reverie, which is an incredible vendor in the space. Can't speak highly enough of them, to really take a deep dive in governance and make recommendations for both Benki lending markets, Benki liquid staking, and subsequent products. And so we will be rolling out governance in 2023, I believe. We've done a lot of work on it for the last 12 months. Pretty much almost immediately after we launched, we started looking at governance. That's a commitment we made to the community and something we think is important. It's just a function of doing it in such a way that it allows the protocol to continue to thrive and not just a means to avoid regulatory scrutiny, because we all know that's a bit of a veil now. Going to governance, going to DAO does not necessarily protect anybody. So we believe it's done for the wrong reasons. We're trying to approach it for the right reasons, in a very strategic and structured way. So that will happen in 2023. We have some upgrades to, or additions, I guess, to the VE mechanics that are very important, that will be coming out. We have another project we haven't told anybody about really, that will come out in 2023, probably in the latter part. We have, of course, institutional liquid staking, and then the usual suspects. I mean, our job really is to understand, all the new protocols that are coming in the space. How can we help them? How can they potentially add value to our users? That's a lot of work. It's, constant, all day, every day. We're on calls, learning about protocols, understanding teams, what they're trying to do. How can we help? We spend a lot of time looking at new assets. Listing a new asset on Benki is not a small task. It's a very involved process. And so, we're going to continue to look at assets, and when assets meet the criteria, of course, we're happy to support them on the lending protocol. We have to evolve our liquid staking product. We're working on something that will be out in 2023 in terms of how you can redeem early if you wanted to your SFX, even though there's currently a 15-day liquid staking period that we put in place. We're going to reduce that significantly if people want to redeem early. So that's something that we're in the final stages of at the moment, but may not be released for a little bit. Yeah, lots of stuff going on. Definitely have not slowed down during the bear market. That's for darn sure.
Yeah, for sure. You guys have a lot coming up, and everyone always says bear markets are the best time for building. I mean, I personally entered this space right after the ICO bubble in early 2018, and so what I realized was, when I got in, I think some of the energy had been sucked out of the room, but in hindsight, a lot of the major projects that we see today were built during these bear cycles. So
absolutely
amazing to see you guys are still building. I guess for listeners who want to follow along the Benki journey and get the latest updates, how should they stay in touch?
Yeah, great question. I think our Telegram obviously is we're very active. All the founding team is consistently in the Telegram channel. Discord, of course, we have the Benki Discord. Our Twitter, which is where I'm speaking from right now, is a great place to reach out to us. We have, pretty much around the clock monitoring by someone in the core team on all of those venues. I mean, I believe we have a contact form even on our website, or at least an email address that you can send email questions to. Yeah, we try to make it as easy as possible.
I love it, even the old school way.
Even the old school way. The only thing we haven't done is given out anybody's phone number, because I can't imagine what that would what that would do. But yeah, there's a lot of ways to get a hold of us. I think we do a lot of these kind of AMAs. Often there's time for listener questions. I'm happy to stay a bit longer if you want to, if we want to take any questions. But yeah, don't be shy, guys. There's, if you have questions, concerns, challenges, anything you want to know, we're accessible. Just reach out.
Great. Yeah, I think if you have a few minutes, let's see if we can take some user questions.
Let's do it. I got 10 minutes.
Cool. So anyone who has any questions for Benki, if you raise your hand, we'll bring you up to the stage one at a time.
And we'll see if they all rush in at the same time. It's kind of funny. Often when we do this, we have so many questions we can't get through them. And then there's other times where everybody's a little bit shy. If nobody has any questions, I'll take it that Mark is the world's greatest moderator. I think JCal has some competition from the All In pod, and we in fact just covered everything. But we'll see.
We do have Benjamin here who requested to speak.
Beauty.
Yeah, hi guys. Thanks for the AMA. Quick question: will you open like the deposits for the key for Chi again on the supply side?
Great question. There will be a point in time. Absolutely, it's something that we look at all the time. Honestly, it's obvious that both for the value proposition of the Chi token, that's something that is of interest to most people. The reason that we paused that was due to a lot of the exploit structures. If you remember that Abraham guy that was going around, he eventually got arrested. But something that we thought was not possible, just because of the amount of assets required, was theoretically possible to exploit the protocol if you had enough resources. Maybe not exploit the protocol, but definitely have a negative impact on the protocol and leading to bad debt, as we've seen with what Ibrahim was doing on other protocols. Mango is a prime example. Anyways, so for that reason, our risk partners and our security partners, as well as ourselves and Chainlink and quite a few different groups, came to the decision on staking the Chi token and pausing that for the time being. We have since worked through hundreds, thousands, probably, of scenarios, honestly, with Chaos Labs and other partners, trying to figure out what are even the unlikely but possible risk vectors for the Chi token staking, because it's low float, low market cap relative to the rest of the assets. We still have a pooled lending protocol, so the protocol security is essentially at the mercy of the weakest asset, which in our case is the Chi token, in terms of total liquidity and so on and so forth. So yeah, something that of course we're focused on. We still look at, I'd like to say daily, but at least a couple times a week, with our security partners, modeling more and more things. As soon as we're incredibly confident that we have all of the risks mitigated, we will absolutely look at doing that again. Good question.
Okay, thanks, Benjamin. So I don't think I've seen anyone else raise their hand, so I think we can safely call this a wrap. JD, thanks so much for being here. I hope this was as insightful as it was for me, for everyone else. Any last words that you'd like to share with the audience?
Oh, I just muted myself. Yeah, the only last thing I'd say is I know we've talked a lot about Benki today, but we are huge fans of what you guys are working on. Super, super stoked for V2, and the traction and stuff. For anybody listening, if you're not familiar with Sin Futures, take a look. It's definitely worth it. They're an exceptional team that we're pleased to be partnered with and friends with. So yeah, we've talked a lot about Benki today, but I want to take an opportunity to plug you guys. Anybody that's from our community,
really appreciate it.
From our community listening or anything, check out Sin Futures. Great project. I think you guys are definitely innovating in an incredible aspect of the space, and I'm excited to see what 2023 has in store for you guys.
Awesome. Yeah. Those of you who aren't familiar, Sin Futures is a perp stacks. We have our V2 coming up within the next few weeks, I think toward the end of the month. And one of the things that differentiates us is we allow anyone to permissionlessly come and create futures markets. So if there's any pair that you don't see that you'd like to be on the platform, people can launch a futures pair with just a couple of clicks within 30 seconds, completely permissionless, no intervention from the team. So yeah, come check us out. We have some major trading campaigns coming up for the V2 launch. So we'd love to see some of you guys in this In Futures community. All right, JD, thanks so much for being here again. Looking forward to kind of collaborating with your team going forward. I know we've been in touch for quite a while now, and excited to follow you guys on your journey.
My pleasure, brother. Thanks for having us. Everybody, thanks for listening. Thanks for your attention. Give us a follow. And yeah, any questions, anything, don't be shy. And yeah, have a great day, guys.